Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The government shutdown is now in its third day, and it's already adding to the economic challenges in Northern Virginia. Congressman James Walkinshaw is just 1 month into representing Fairfax County as federal job cuts and economic uncertainty ripple through the region. He joins me to share what he's hearing from constituents, how he's approaching the crisis, and what this moment reveals about the future of federal work in the DMV. Congressman Walkinshaw, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
You're finishing your first month on the job. How's it going so far? Any surprises?
Well, it is an incredible honor to represent Virginia's 11th district. It's been an eventful 3 weeks. I wish I could say that the shutdown that we're in now is a surprise. It's not a complete surprise, unfortunately, but there certainly have been surprises along the way. The day that I was sworn in, Charlie Kirk was shot, murdered, assassinated, which obviously defined a lot of that week. And it feels like we've lived a year's worth of history and events in the last 3 weeks here in terms of what's taken place in the country and in Washington. So it's been a busy time.
You've certainly had your hands full. What are you hearing from your constituents in Fairfax County about the recent history of job losses with respect to the federal government and now the shutdown?
So from the day that I announced that I was running for Congress, I started hearing from federal workers who, described to me the months of kind of siege and assault that they've experienced by the Trump administration, the job losses, the pressure to leave via the fork or one of the forks, the really hostile workplaces, the attacks on their service, denigration of their service from the highest levels of the administration. So there's a lot of frustration and anxiety and anger, I think, in the federal workforce. And these are folks who just want to serve their country and help their agencies accomplish their missions on behalf of the American people. And unfortunately, the Trump administration is making that next to impossible for them to do.
You're new to the elected office, but certainly not new to these discussions in Fairfax County. You've seen government shutdowns in the past, I'm sure. Does this one feel different or sound different to you?
I was Jerry Connolly's chief of staff for each of the last 3 shutdowns. Of course, one of those was very brief, just a couple of days. The other 2 were longer, including the longest in history, I think 35 days. What is the same as at least one of those shutdowns? The 2013 shutdown was also about healthcare. And, at that time, Republicans led by Senator Ted Cruz trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act and take health care coverage away from the American people. From my perspective, this shutdown is also about health care. We have a health care crisis in the country created by the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. And one of the things that I and other Democrats are fighting for is to cancel those cuts to health care. But this one does feel different. I think the kind of scale and scope of the Trump administration's 9 months of attacks on federal workers and the federal workforce being the lead-in to this shutdown changes the dynamic. And the way that I've described it, and it comes from what federal workers have said to me, is they've been living through a de facto Trump shutdown of much of the federal government for 9 months. We've seen whole agencies, USAID, CFPB, U.S. Department of Education, largely shut down. So that's different than previous shutdowns, and that changes the dynamic.
Well, Fairfax County is home to over 80,000 federal employees by our count, and even more federal contractor employees. So what's the real-world impact of these job cuts and agency downsizes that you just mentioned? Are you starting to see it show up in the economy?
So we've seen in Fairfax County the unemployment rate rising throughout the Trump administration. I think the last number was 3.6%, which is still low relative to other parts of the country, even other parts of Virginia. But for Fairfax County, it's the highest number we've seen since 2021 when we were coming out of the COVID pandemic. And Unfortunately, the line on the graph for unemployment in our region points up, and we expect those numbers to continue to rise, especially given the large number of folks who stopped getting paid on September 30th because they took the deferred retirement or one of the forks. Some of those folks will now, over time, start showing up in that unemployment number. So we expect it to rise. So, yes, it's having an impact. I think on a personal level, everybody in Fairfax now knows somebody who's lost their job because of the Trump administration, somebody on their cul-de-sac, a parent on their kid's soccer team.
I'm speaking with Congressman James Walkinshaw, who represents Virginia's 11th district. As you look at the scope of these job losses, do you have a sense that it is a permanent reshaping of the Northern Virginia economy, or is this a temporary blip and we might come back to what used to be normal?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. I certainly hope temporary. I certainly hope that in a future administration or even sooner with a change in control in Congress, we can restore some of the cuts and the job cuts that have been made. I think with respect to our economy, the a bright spot is we have been working in Fairfax and in Northern Virginia to diversify our economy, really going back to sequestration. When we saw those impacts and reduction in federal spending, we started working very hard to develop new industries, new technology industries based here in Fairfax. So we have a growing and burgeoning space tech economy here, a growing quantum computing economy here where, we've worked very hard to kind of take advantage of our talented workforce and be the place in the world where our workforce knows how to utilize and take advantage of AI. So we have a lot of good things going, but we're certainly in a rough patch that I hope is temporary.
So, as you speak with your constituents and you think about that, perhaps reordering of the economy, what do you want Virginians to know right now? If they're worried about their job, if they're considering what happens next, are there particular resources that you call out or job relocations or realignments that you want to make folks aware of?
Well, first, for federal workers who either have lost their job or feel they're at risk of losing their job, I want them to know that there are many of us, myself included, who deeply honor their public service, their service to the nation. I think we don't say that enough, probably, given the attacks that they're facing. But in terms of, tangible job resources, when I was on the Board of Supervisors, we stood up a resource hub for federal workers that exists to this day that provides a number of links and access to job boards and job opportunities and resume training opportunities and all kinds of things to help folks make that pivot and that shift. So I can't recommend that enough. The Fairfax County Economic Development Authority has done a great job of pairing talent, especially talent leaving the federal workforce, with private sector opportunities that exist. So those are two tangible resources, Fairfax County's Federal Worker Resource page and Fairfax County Economic Development Authority, that are great for folks. But there's a lot of stuff out there.
And so as we sit here on day 3 of this round of government shutdown, what do you see as the way out of this? What should furloughed feds be thinking about in terms of how long this will last and what the signs might be for resolution?
Well, it's hard to prognosticate how long it will last. Obviously, myself and other Democrats were frustrated over the course of this week that congressional Republicans, House Republicans, were not even in Washington. We were here ready to negotiate a bipartisan agreement to cancel the healthcare cuts, keep the government open, protect federal workers, but the Republicans were out of town. We remain, and I certainly remain, willing, able, ready to negotiate with anyone at any time to reopen the government and address the healthcare crisis that we're facing. I think there are some cautionary signs of optimism and conversations that are taking place now about, possible negotiations around the Affordable Care Act subsidies that could be paired with a continuing resolution. And I think those conversations will will continue, but we really need the president to get engaged here and be the deal maker that he played on TV and wrote a book about. This is an opportunity. He hasn't taken that opportunity thus far, but I hope he will.
I've been speaking with Congressman James Walkinshaw, who represents Virginia's 11th District. Sir, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We'll post this interview to federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.